Hello and welcome back to Lesson 7 of our online teacher induction class. Hopefully by now you've got a good start on your start of school year checklist. You've thought about a lot of the expectations you're going to have for your students, the classroom procedures, classroom rules, the kinds of and types of transitions you're going to use between classes and from one activity to the next. All these things that are very important to a successful start of school year. Now in the last video we talked about classroom management, and today we're going to talk more specifically about individual student discipline. Now if you've given much thought to the videos and the lessons that we've had, you'll see and understand that it's very difficult, well I'll say it's impossible to separate any of these entities from the next. Your start of school year checklist is just as key to successful discipline and classroom management as any other thing that you will do. So none of these can exist without the other. Well, let's take a look at some individual tips and tools for classroom discipline, and specifically for individual student discipline. I'd like to try to get away from just listing things, but this video might have a little bit of a feel of a list because I've made a list to discuss with you in the video, but just some real very specific things, some random things that will help you be successful. So first thing we want to talk about today is know your kids, know your students. Students know if you care about them. You heard that many times in your pre-teacher preparation. As a student, you know when you know if a teacher cared for you. Students can see right through these kinds of things. So we kind of tie that back to the teacher effect and whether you should really be a teacher. You need to genuinely care about your students because they're going to know if you do or don't. So know your kids, greet them daily. The first start to successful discipline in your classroom, know your students and greet them daily. Call them by name. And be yourself with your students. Laugh with them, have a sense of humor, and deal with them appropriately, just like you would like to be dealt with. Individual student discipline, as we kind of alluded to in our introduction to the video, really hinges strongly on the start of school year checklist. I'm going to keep saying this. I said this starting in video 3, and I'll keep saying this till our last video. Have a strong start of school year checklist. Have a plan to communicate your start of school checklist items with your students, and have a plan to practice those. The more those are communicated and practiced, the fewer individual student discipline problems that you're going to have in class. So know your kids, have a strong start of school year checklist, and when you plan for the communication of your start of school year checklist, do you have a few items that are negotiable with your class? And what I mean by this is, do you have a few items that you will let students have input on what the classroom rule will be, what the classroom procedure will be? Are some of your items negotiable? If so, and let me say this, when I say negotiable, these are things that are negotiable at the beginning of the school year as you're establishing your procedures. Once your classroom procedures and expectations are established, they're no longer negotiable. But I would strongly suggest having a few items that you've thought of. Let's say where are you going to turn in your homework, or when you have to be in your seat before the bell rings, or after the bell rings you have to go to your seat. Some things that you are comfortable with letting students have input on in the classroom. What's your quiet signal going to be? How are you going to bring the class to attention? Whatever that is, have some things that you let students have input on, because when they have input and ownership, then they cooperate and work better with you. Once you have the start of school year items ready, your expectations, classroom procedures, share those with your mentor. We're assuming, of course, coming from that you're new to this school district or you're a new teacher. So be sure and share those with your mentor, and the mentor might say, here's a flag we need to look at. Let's look at how you're going to deal with this situation. Let's look at this rule. Let's look at this process. Most administrators will probably require you to turn in your classroom rules. So if that's the case, share these expectations with your principal, your assistant principal, your supervisor. And then, of course, be ready to share in whatever mode is appropriate, be that hard mail, hard copy, email. Share these with parents. It's much easier to work with parents when you do have a discipline problem if they are aware of the expectations just like their student is. We talked a little bit in a video or two back about transitions. These are such important parts of a successful lesson or a successful day in teaching, is having all of your transitions planned. What are you going to do as students come in the room? What do you do before students leave the room? How many times are you going to shift gears, so to speak, in the lesson? And what do you do during those potential downtimes in the classroom? So transitions, we've already talked about as well. So everything continues just to tie together and link together. So be thinking about those things. In the whole first part of this video, tie everything back to your start of school year checklist. And when you do that, make sure everything's consistent. Everything ties together. Everything blends together. Everything works together for your benefit, for the benefit of your students. You know, it's easier to get easier. You've probably heard that, or you've in your preparation you've heard, don't smile until Christmas. Well, I couldn't disagree with these things any more than I can express right now. Maybe it is easier to get easier. That doesn't mean that's what effective classroom management looks like or effective discipline looks like. So once again, we're going to go back to that start of school year checklist. Be consistent. Be consistent with what you're doing in your classroom. And then you don't need to then you don't have to think about things like it's easier to get easier. You don't have to think about things like don't smile until Christmas. Communicate your expectations to your students. Let them have some input. Practice, practice, practice. And then be consistent. Don't negotiate those once the rules are set, the procedures are set. They're non-negotiable. Be consistent with those day to day. So then be yourself, smile, and deal with situations as they arise, because everyone in the classroom knows exactly what to expect. So no reason to have those things like it's easier to get easier or don't smile until Christmas. Smile on day one. I promise you that's the best thing to do. Another topic I think that's always worthy of conversation when you think about individual student discipline is the word empathy. Now, that word empathy would suggest that the teacher has walked a mile in their student's shoes. And I think that's very difficult to do. So any of the Ruby Payne research, and you look at social strata with different, many teachers come from middle class, and in many schools then you have middle class folks teaching students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. When a teacher practices empathy, they take a step back and they look at their students. They try to walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak, to provide some better understanding of why they behave the way they do, why they say some of the things they do, why they actually have the actions that they do at times. So I always want to encourage this, and when I hire teachers here in my current assignment, that's very important to me, that I try to see a caring character in teachers. You know, they have to be competent in their subject matter, first of all. But right after that, and a requisite to being hired in my school, is this showing of caring and empathy for others. So I think few things can pay off more in classroom discipline than students knowing that you care for them, that you take a step back and you look at where they come from. Hopefully dealing with individual student discipline is a rare occurrence, but it will happen. In some schools and some classrooms it happens daily. It depends on the assignment and it changes year to year. It depends a lot on teacher experience. But you have to accept that eventually there will be a discipline issue. What I would encourage all teachers to do, regardless of their experience, don't overthink student discipline. Don't overanalyze student discipline. And what I mean by that is, go back to your start of school year checklist. What is your procedure? What do the kids expect you to do? And then do that. You see, there are no winners and no losers when you deal with your classroom discipline. You know, anytime there's discipline, there's some kind of an interruption, and you know your role as a teacher is to minimize that as much as possible. But there's no winner, no loser in the situation. But if you have practiced your start of school year checklist, the students will know that regardless of winners and losers, the teacher, you, are in control of the situation, and they have to know that. And when they know that, then that makes all of these things just go that much more smoothly. And finally, as we wrap up our discussion about individual student discipline, every teacher needs to understand that they will be judged about how they manage their classroom. Assistant principals do walkthroughs in your classroom, they do evaluations, they visit your class. And a great deal of the judgment early on in a teaching career will be based on how that teacher manages students, how that teacher deals with students. You'll have some advice from veteran teachers that say, don't send kids to the office. Once you send students to the office, you have this worry that the principal or the assistant principal thinks that you don't manage your classroom or you don't have control of your classroom. One of the roles of the administration is support the teacher in this discipline process. So certainly, at times, discipline warrants the attention of the administration. I think an important piece of knowledge in this student discipline process is an understanding by the teacher, though, that once they do turn discipline into the office, it's no longer theirs. I mean, the principal might have a cooperative effort with the teacher, but for all practical reasons, it's no longer yours. So with that knowledge, practice the idea that I don't send a student to the office until I'm ready to give it to someone else. It might immediately be given right back to me, but it might not be. And once you give it to someone else, the student knows that you've given it to someone else. And so there's some weaknesses at times in that. So it's a very tough balance and a difficult decision to know when to involve the administration. And just as a general rule, if you can handle it without large disruption to the rest of the class, then handle it and deal with it. Students will respect you for it, and ultimately they'll know you're still in control. Well, that's all for now. I'm going to try to post a lot of things for you to check out on the website. There is a wealth of information on classroom discipline. Be careful what you accept as authentic, and also, you know, it's important to listen to your administration and your mentor. So continue to work on that start of school year checklist and start thinking of how you're going to deal with individual student discipline. Until next time.